Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I announce I wanted to start this video sort of making a joke and being all sad and stuff, but I can't contain my happiness. I have been warning for weeks that the national dialogue is going to be a disaster, that we should absolutely not be going ahead with it. And the answer to that is pretty simple. The national dialogue will not achieve anything. It's not a binding situation. The president didn't say that they commit to keeping with whatever is found within the national dialogue, or they commit themselves to achieving whatever is laid out at the end of the national dialogue. The national dialogue is literally just that. It's just going to be people talking, and then if the government likes what the people said, they'll implement it, but if they don't, then they just won't. That's literally what it is. So effectively, the national dialogue is just another election. That's it. And I genuinely think the ANC thought that this was going to go their way. They thought that this is going to work, but they had their doubts, which is why we saw prior to this, we saw the DA first pull out of the national dialogue. Then we saw a number of foundations, in fact, all of the reputable foundations in the country pull out, and all of them citing the exact same thing. The Freedom Front Plus pulled out of it, Action SA pulled out of it, all of them citing the same thing. This is no longer a citizen-led. Remember, that was the promise. Citizens would lead the national dialogue. And over the course of the preceding months, the ANC slowly but surely started to implement more political leadership. In other words, the dialogue would now be led by the politicians who would safeguard against what the public is and is not allowed to say. So it kicked off yesterday and it immediately descended into chaos. This is them 20 minutes late. The convention hasn't started yet. So Ramaphosa was supposed to speak at 11. He had not spoken yet. They were sitting there. They had technical difficulties. The mics and stuff wouldn't work. There are protesters outside. The journalist from SABC News can't even hide his disgust with what is actually going on here. Everything is just descending into chaos. Nothing works. Pretty much how this country is. The president then, of course, starts his little speech.
This convention. And everyone who is following these proceedings around the country. I do thank the EPG, because when there was doubt on whether we should proceed with this convention today, they met and gave me counsel.
Man, this guy speaks so... he annoys you so much.
And said to me, President, much as people might think that we are not entirely ready.
He delivers this speech, by the way, I think almost an hour late to the actual convention. So clearly they weren't not entirely ready. They were not ready at all, right? But he wants to thank the EPG and members of the public that say to him, no, we must continue with this national dialogue. Newsroom actually did a poll where they asked people whether or not the national dialogue is collapsing before it even begins, with 74% of people saying, yeah, of course it is, right? He continues to speak a bunch of nonsense, and I genuinely struggle to listen to this guy, and we still have to listen to him one more time because, as you guys know, I like to look at the facts. I like to sort of fact check what we're going through because there's so much misinformation in this country, or when it comes from the government, it's actually deemed disinformation. There's a legal distinction there. So I thought we'll fact check the president on a part of his speech.
We also need to ask ourselves, why do so many people live in abject poverty and so few live lives of opulence?
The answer to that is actually incredibly simple, because you, the ANC, have been in charge for 30 years. You have Jacob Zuma, and then you have this clown on our screens right now. Now you have a government that has overseen the largest collapse in the history. I'll quickly give you guys just one stat on this. The CPI basket in 2011 was 300 and something, 358 Rand, I believe, for 28 items in the CPI basket. The CPI basket, by the way, is the basket of goods that most South Africans will buy on a regular basis, at least once a month. Today, in 2025, that same basket is 1,383, I think. That is a 358% increase since 2011. Have your salaries increased by 358% since 2011? I think not. This means that people on the SASA grant, 350 Rand per month, can't even afford the basket of goods in the CPI, and the people on the SASA grants are increasing year on year due to failed government. So, Mr. President, you are the reason that this country is the way that it is, and so many poor people live in abject poverty, and so few people live in opulence.
Why, after decades of democracy, are the prospects of a white child so much better than those of a black child?
Because you have excluded white people from the economy consistently year after year, and white people have been forced to look after themselves, which is why we have universities popping up paid for by Solidarity and AfriForum for Afrikaners only, because you have discriminated against Afrikaners consistently. And that has just forced us to open our own businesses. It's forced us to go our own way, while the rest of the country is still reliant on you liberating them. The problem is that they need liberation from you. And before anyone, because I've had this debate now on X for the last 2 days, before anyone comes at me and says, oh, but you Afrikaners just never want to share, you don't want to be inclusive, you just want to do everything by yourself, we were more than happy to participate. But Afrikaans has been excluded from every single major university in the country. Afrikaners are consistently made the enemy year by our clown of a president on the national dialogue meant to bring all of us together. Race is immediately front and center in his speech. You have excluded us. We are simply taking care of ourselves. If you want to be inclusive, build your own shit and show us how to be inclusive, right? Be the inclusive example that you want to see in the world. You keep crying about us being rich. Well, we're just starting our own businesses because we're no longer allowed in the economy. Again, Mr. President, you are the reason all of this is happening.
We need to ask ourselves that. We also need to ask ourselves, why do women get paid less than men for the same work?
They don't. There's actually no evidence anywhere in the world that women get paid less than men for the same work. Because every single study that has ever shown a disparity in earnings have only looked at company-wide men versus women. The problem with that is men and women don't make the same choices. Women choose jobs often that won't take as much of their time so that they can spend time at home, so that they can start families, whereas men tend to take jobs that will keep them busy, men tend to work more overtime than women. These are just choices that men and women make. In fact, in Google, there was a lawsuit brought a few years ago by a bunch of women alleging that they were being paid less. YouTube or Google launched a full investigation to find all of the instances of them paying women less. And ultimately what they ended up finding was that they were actually paying men less than they were paying women for the exact same jobs. If it were, and look, there's an easy test that we can do about this. If it was legal for companies to pay women less than what they pay men, every company in the world would only employ women. If I could save 30% on my wage bill every single month by just employing women, I would. That would be great, right? 30% extra profits that I can take home and buy a boat. Like, why wouldn't companies do this? The fact that they're not doing this tells you that this is just a complete lie.
That's what we need to ask ourselves. Now, we also must go deeper and ask ourselves why, when we have a Bill of Rights in our Constitution, are the LGBTQI plus people still discriminated against? Why are
Okay, so there's no evidence anywhere that I can find of actual discrimination against LGBT people. What the president here seems to completely miss, what just completely escapes him, is the fact that I may not agree, right, with LGBTQ people. I still don't want to see them get killed or get arrested, but you can also not force me to associate with them. Like, there's no such thing. There's no way that you can do that. And in fact, when you look at the actual surveys and studies that's done on this, less than 1% of South Africans identify as LGBTQ. You look at the actual studies here that show the attitude of South Africans to homosexuality, and what you find is 72% of people feel that same-sex sexual activity is morally wrong. South Africa is a country that deeply does not give a damn about gay people. And even with 72% of people not believing that homosexuality is morally okay, you still find that 55% of people would accept a gay relative, a gay family member. 51% of people say, yeah, gay people should be allowed to exist. I can say gay people should be allowed to exist and still believe that it is morally wrong and it is depravity. That is the attitude of actual South Africans when looking at these statistics. There's no evidence that gay people are being discriminated against in any way, shape, or form in this country, by the way.
Are they still stigmatized and harassed? Why do clinics run out of medicine? Are questions that we must ask ourselves.
Mr. President, I'm going to make this super easy for you. You're the reason all of this is happening. Because he goes on and he mentions a bunch of other things that we're going to have to grapple with. You're the government. Over the course of the last 30 years, you have taken control of every single measure of society, every single sector. You've gotten your greedy little, grubby little fingers into those sectors. You're the reason our country is melting down. It's no one else's fault. No one else is to blame. It's just you. You see fights breaking out, right? People arguing on this stage. You see the president sort of just kind of falling asleep here. Here you have a man storming the stage. Very, very angry. I'll let you guys watch this. And by the way, this guy, his frustration is not misplaced. The problem is people showed up to what was supposed to be a national dialogue. And instead what ended up happening was politicians were speaking down to the people there. Basically, they were just telling the people what the national dialogue was going to be. The people were given very little opportunity to actually have this dialogue that they're supposed to be having.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Listen,
Have a good lunch.
the government has not kept its commitment. They are liars. They want you to go out so that we cannot address you on the crimes of the government. This government is...
And of course, SABC does their moral duty as good stooges of the state to cut the mic to make sure that he does not speak anymore. They also don't even show him or just the audio that would carry to their cameras, like good little soldiers, because our media is corrupt number 2 if the president is corrupt number 1. And here you have another one. This was also during the national dialogue. It was such a farce.
We are the foot soldiers. We are on the ground. All of you here have bodyguards. We don't have bodyguards. We had a colleague who came here from 3 a.m. in the morning.
All right,
we are
thank you
foot
so
soldiers.
much.
We know what's happening on the ground. And if you say it's a national dialogue for us, you can't shut us down. It's sad.
See, that's the thing. They were consistently shutting down people that were saying things that they didn't like. They were consistently cutting mics from people that would say things that they didn't agree with, or they would just not give the public the opportunity to speak. And that's because Cyril Ramaphosa, I think, hoped that they could have the national dialogue part of like a mock-up, sort of pretend like they're listening to people, but really they would be the ones sort of determining what we speak about so that people just think we're speaking. What they did not expect, and I think what the one good thing that's coming out of this national dialogue is there can be no doubt from the president of this country that people are sick and tired of the government. People have no time for the ANC, no time for their lies. This entire thing has just descended into absolute chaos. You could hear it even during his speech, the amount of cheers he got. Most people weren't even clapping. They probably just had a bunch of ANC people bust in. They were just sitting there going, clapping for every single thing he does because no one really cares anymore. Let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about all of this. I'd love to read your thoughts. As always, massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons and the YouTube channel members for keeping this channel going and for supporting the work that I do. If you think more people should see rational and honest conversation that is biased, I'm not going to pretend like it isn't. I have my biases. I am human. Please consider hitting the like button, hitting that subscribe button, smashing the bell, leaving a comment. Engagement always works. And if you want to support a little further, just hit the join button below this video or click the link in the description down below to Patreon. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. A peace.